Beautiful. And let me just take a moment to pull us together. Hold on. So nice to see you all. Yeah, it's going to be really nice. So, welcome everyone to Awakening to Magic. And for many of you, I know, but for those of you who I don't know, I am Lorraine Goldblum, and I teach something called Vortex Healing. And I am here tonight with Brett Bevel. Say hello, Brett, so we can get you up on the screen there.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you again, Lorraine, for having me here. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. And Brett is a very accomplished healer, Reiki master. You've written a number of books, including one called The Wizard's Guide to Energy Healing, which is, of course, the best title ever. And we have known each other. We were talking about this in the video. We have known each other maybe 20 years,
Yeah.
through the Omega Institute and just wonderful work that you have done. And we were also talking earlier how about 20 years ago, when I was first at my first trip to the Omega Institute in 2005, was when I was invited to be a vortex healing teacher. So you and Omega and everything that's holds a very special place in my heart. And I thought, well, who better? If I want to sit down and have a conversation about the nature of magic, I want to sit down with Brett Bevel and have that conversation. So thank you for being here tonight. And before we get into it, I just want to let everyone know the plan for the evening. Um, We'd like to just talk a little bit, get our awareness into the nature of magic, why we feel it's so important, what we're excited to share about it. That part is going to be recorded and sent to you in a follow-up. Perhaps we'll have some time for some questions and answers, but we don't just want to talk about magic, we want to share magic. So the second part of the evening, Brett is going to do a healing for the group. And then I will do a healing for the group. And for those of you who are Vortex Healing students, you'll be delighted to know that Galen Carroll is with us tonight. And we'll be doing the heal. I know, it's great. It's going to be a magical day. And Galen and I will be doing the healing together at the end of the evening. So it's really it's really special. And to be able to sort of sit down and give language to something that's so meaningful is important. And to bring awareness into the nature of magic and what it really is. So before we get into it, let me sort of toss something out to you, Brett. When I said, hey, let's sit down and let's have a conversation about magic, what came to mind for you? Like, what was, when you think of magic, be it your first experience of magic or the definition of magic, when you think of magic, what do you think of and what does that mean for you personally?
For me, it means a place where your consciousness is kind of in tune with the divine, almost like when they're like collaborating or co-creating. And
Mm.
sometimes I refer to it as being in a place of co-creating with divine imagination, where something pops in your head and you don't know why, you don't know where that thought came from, but it opens you a doorway, whether that's a doorway in your own awareness or a doorway of like, oh, I should turn left rather than turn right because there's something down this alley and I need to find out what it is. So it's that playing with that sense of divine imagination, and also for me, that sense of playfulness is also an essential key element to at least to how I embrace being in that space of magic. So I
I
don't know if that
love that.
helps you.
Imagination is such a powerful creative word, isn't it? And it just opens the heart. the
Yeah.
nature of imagination and playfulness is, I think, what we felt magic was when we were little, but kind of lost the sense of what, magic really is as adults. I think that's really beautiful. And I think we've fallen into a lot of magical thinking, like what gives magic a bad name. What
Mhm.
magic isn't is magical thinking is a way of, I guess it's probably trying to keep control, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we do that to, like, I know I have a background in theater, and actors and athletes are probably the most superstitious people on the planet. And there was all this magical thinking. If we had this ritual before a show, we would have a good show. And it was entertaining, but it was a way of trying to keep control. And it was only as an adult that I was able to circle back to what I imagined magic to be when I was little.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that because my first journey with magic, it was kind of in that more ritualistic space, but that started to feel stale to me at a certain point, and I felt like I had to let go and go back and just to that space of the childlike sense of wonder, the magic that can appear in any moment, that it doesn't have to be about some ritual that was written in the 1600s where I'm trying to invoke something. It was more like just being in the moment and being open to that divine presence that's always with us.
Right. So do you feel like you had that as a kid and then kind of found your way back to that?
Yeah, I had it as a kid, and I'll go into my little story here if you if you
Yeah.
bear with me. So, I had it as a kid, and then it got squeezed out of me, and then in the early 1990s, I moved to New York City after
Yeah.
doing a lot of therapy and 12 step and other kinds of inner work to try to do my healing path, and realizing, okay, I appreciate that, but I still feel pretty messed up. But
Yeah.
I was in New York City, and I burned my finger. I was a barista. I burned my finger on a cappuccino machine while making a latte. Didn't take care of it. The next day I came into work and there's this red line going up my arm, and my boss is like, "You need to, to go to the ER."
Wow.
I was in the ER for a couple days. The guy in the bed next to me died and then was brought back, and then his wife didn't want him to be alive, so then they pulled the plug on him again. It was a very crazy time. But then after that, I ended up being on workman's comp for a couple weeks while my thumb healed, and would just wander around New York City with this sense of getting lost and just allowing myself to be lost. And I came across this book called Earth Magic by a woman named Diana Weinstein or Marion Weinstein.
Okay.
And I started doing these rituals out of it. And when I would do these rituals, I would suddenly just see these lights like sparkling around me, but it wasn't just when I was doing the rituals. Like I'd be riding the subway and getting off the subway and see these almost like multicolored trapezoids and things just floating around me. And I thought, either I'm totally losing my mind or this stuff is real. And if I'm losing my mind, I might as well just pretend it's real because what what else am I going to do? Um, and it really opened a big doorway for me in terms of my own healing. But again, at a certain point, it got so enveloped in this ritual has to be this way and blah, 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 that it felt almost like stale and stifling at a certain point. And that's when probably around the same time that I let that go, was when I started getting more into energy healing, Reiki, starting with Reiki, but then eventually vortex healing
Wow.
and other things.
Beautiful. Well, I think ritual, it has an important place because I believe that the design of rituals to remind us of God and to
Yeah.
remind us. And so on one level, I'm a big fan. Um, but if we forget what the ritual is for,
Yeah.
we lose touch. And so it's a nice doorway. It seemed like it was a real nice doorway for you to find magic again. That's a beautiful story. And what better place to find magic than New York City? I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think for me, I always believed in magic. And when I was little, I really had a sense of magic. But as I got older, something happened, issues, life, as you say, it gets squeezed out of you. And I guess at some point I stopped believing that magic could happen for me. It's not that
Hmm.
I stopped believing in magic, but I didn't believe that I was sensitive enough or psychic enough or whatever enough for magic to find me or work through me. And I remember having an experience. It was after I began to study vortex healing. And I really wanted to connect to the divine source of the work. And I wasn't sure that I could, and I prayed. I remember sitting in a garden one time praying to the divine, can you show yourself to me? Because I thought if I had a visual, like your sparkly lights, that would affirm. And I never really had that. And I had friends who, would go to coffee with their guides and had all this, and I was jealous and insecure. And I said, I pray to the divine, show yourself to me, in the form of Merlin, can you show yourself to me? And in the garden, I looked up through my third eye and I saw what looked like to me a young Ron Howard.
Hmm.
All right. And maybe not everyone knows who Ron Howard. He's a director now, but when he was younger, he was a child actor and red hair. And a young Ron Howard was walking up the path, kind of older than Opie, but younger than Richie Cunningham. He was sort of in that tween. And he was smiling. And that was Merlin. That was an expression of the divine. And I know I wouldn't have made that up because I would have made up something more dramatic and and I realize that the divine is when the unknowable comes to you in a very personal and intimate way
Mhm.
and meets us where we are. And that was the nature of magic, that somehow this vast unknowableness met me in this place. And I never forgot it. It was so touching. And it just sort of opened the door to possibilities. And I began to believe the magic again. So
Mhm.
it's a very strange story, very strange experience of the divine, but it was very profound for me, and it helped me to begin to rebuild that trust.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think our issues break our trust, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about in my own journey, something that I forgot to mention when you're talking about magic. Like long before New York City, there was a very magical time where um, I had no idea what I was doing. I was totally lost. I had graduated college and felt like nothing made sense. And I was in Southern California at the time, and I just took this drive up the California coast, and something happened. Something energetically happened while driving up Highway 1, right? And as I got close to San Francisco, I just had this sense of the feeling of uh, that divine presence that's in everyone and everything. And I would got to San Francisco and was wandering or again just wandering the streets and um had this feeling that I could see in people. It was like this heightened state of awareness that on that trip where I felt like I could see in people that divine perfection of who they were, and also simultaneously within that seeing maybe their brokenness or their faults or their errors, which also in its own way was still divine and perfect. And it was just this really trippy state of consciousness that I was in. And I remember then I stayed in this hotel in Berkeley, and I remember sitting on this bench and just like there was this picnic bench near the hotel. It was a little more of a motel than a hotel. And I was just crying, looking at my own life and looking at my family and thinking like, oh, they're both divine and really screwed up like all at the same time. And then a couple days later, I drove on up to Ashland, Oregon, and I was staying in this youth hostel in Ashland, Oregon. And I remember they had a piano down there. I don't play piano, but I remember just sitting in front of the piano and I was literally just letting my hands move across the
Mm.
keys. And the next thing I noticed, there's a small crowd of other young people from the youth hostel who were standing behind me. looking at me like I know what I'm doing because the music is sounding really nice, even though I'm just like literally letting my hands just dance across the keys without any
Yeah,
idea of what the next note is supposed to be. And then there was a certain point where I just felt like this sense of self-awareness popped in, and it was like, then the magic was gone. Then I stopped.
yeah,
But I remember those moments, those 3 days, it was like were so key in my journey because I never forgot that feeling or that sensation. I'm like, magic is real. There's got to be something other than what I'm being taught in terms of, the more traditional outlook on life. And so it felt like that happened a good, 10 years prior to my time in New York City. So
right.
I have to mention that.
No, I'm glad that you did. And I think you point to something really important is that the magic is always there, and we get distracted. As you've heard me talk about issues, an issue is anything that keeps you out of being present, on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level. And they take up a lot of space and noise and room in our awareness. And they distract us from the moment. But I think what you demonstrated so beautifully is, you were in a place where you could recognize that the magic was in everything all of the time, and you were surrendered enough to trust the flow of that to the extent it moved through your body and created this beautiful music. I mean, I played saxophone as a kid. That never happened for me. Did not have that experience of beautiful music. I think that's a great story. And sometimes when people say, I'm in the flow, it just carried me. It is. You can feel that divine intention moving through, moving as you.
Yeah.
And then we begin to trust it until our issues come back. That moment of self awareness, you say, we're like, oh, wait, I can't. Oh, but this isn't. Oh,
Yeah.
but what if, and all of that creeps up and we lose sight and move back into trying to manage the moment
Hmm.
as we so often do. Yeah. So what would you say? Let me ask you this. If people are looking for magic, people, want to have a way of experiencing magic in their life, what would your suggestion be to them? How did you make that a regular thing for you?
I mean, for me, I often say this when I'm teaching, but in terms of just allowing that place of play,
Mm,
allowing that place, because I think that play it opens that doorway to be back again in that kind of innocent, childlike, open to the moment space, right? When you're playing, unless it's some really scripted thing, you have to really just kind of be in the moment. And that through play, whether it's just playing outside. And for me, playing can be talking to the trees or talking
yeah,
to whatever else is out there that you sense in nature. I think being in nature too, to me, is very a big doorway to magic because there's just so much life out there in terms of, the plants, the animals, the seen and unseen energies that are around. Um, I think again, I keep going back into my own history, but between that time, that time in California and that time in New York, there was a period of a number of years where off and on I was working in an outdoor education center in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And again, that sense of being deeply immersed in nature. There was a very magical yellow spring that came out there, and that's when I really first started I think like seeing spirits in a way, and
yeah,
sensing like, oh wow. I mean, there was even like a small Native American like burial mound. It was very small, but it was on the property there. And so would see these things walking around. And my job was to take kids on hikes at night too. So it was like, and we were told do not use a flashlight unless there's an emergency and you have to. So it was this sense of like really getting into that sense of what is your consciousness like in that place where when the lights come down and you're just, relying on your other senses to walk through the forest and sense things. And it was really quite a powerful time. So I think also in my own evolution was an important step in terms of connecting deeper to a sense of magic.
I think that's beautiful. And play, yeah. As a Virgo with a Virgo rising, play doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. But play is when the heart is open, isn't it? When you're engaging and you put for your agenda down, even
Right.
if it's a playful win, but you really put any important agenda down and your heart is open to engaging. I also found that a gratitude practice is incredibly powerful.
Hmm.
Um, it seems silly to me at first, but when I would take just a little time to sort of assess what I'm grateful for in my life, I began to realize what I'm most grateful for isn't anything that I made happen, that
Hmm.
everything that I'm truly grateful for, my health and the love and my life and all of that was a gift from something greater. And taking a moment to recognize that and that appreciation began to really open my heart as well. And I think that practice sort of led to a practice of, and this is the real hard part, is keeping that sense of gratitude and that sense of play in the dark moments.
Hmm.
Being able to apply that when things are hard and challenging and the issue is really in your face, or you have, pain, direct pain on all levels, to be able to still bring that open heart is why we do the work that we do, I guess. Why we bring our tools and learn a practice of meeting that in love.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And thank God we have our tools. And we see the magic of the tools, the work that you do, the work that I've been fortunate enough to be part of, to be able to meet our pain in love and in magic. And most of us have, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us became seekers because we were motivated by our pain.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, and that's okay. That's okay because it's the path that led us to something beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to you earlier before about the Elizabeth Gilbert workshop at Omega that just happened this weekend called Magical Freedom Weekend. And I remember in that her talking about how it's those moments of pain that really cause us to seek a sense of transformation, right?
Yeah.
It's not usually the real fun weekend that you had that then causes you to to go seek some deeper, sense of transformation or tools. That it's really when we're in those
We don't
like,
necessarily wake up out of contentment. That's not
yeah, yeah.
the motivating force. Yeah, no, I think that's well said. That's well said. So, just on the note of magic, anything else that your heart wants to share, um, in terms of your experience of magic or your wish for it? Is there anything else that you'd like to, before we maybe open it to questions or the healing itself? Is there anything else you wanted to sort of touch on in your experience of magic?
Yeah, I don't know why this is popping in my head, but it is, so I have to follow it. So, in that outdoor ed center where I was at, again, working with kids, they were mostly 12-year-olds. At one point, I I created this game for the kids called Zen Ball, and it had really no rules. There was a ball, and there was one base, and and it was really funny to watch the kids kind of interact with this game and then through that kind of improvise their own reality or their own structure around how this game should unfold because there was no rules to it other than there's a base and there's one base and there's one ball. And I kind of invented it because there was kind of a sense of some kids feeling left out of the kickball and the other things that they would do
Right.
when we played this game, it was like the kids that were always left out and that never got to be part of. they would just come alive in such a big way. And so for me, again, there was that sense of a deep sense of play, a deep sense of being allowed to surrender into the moment and whatever the moment was creating, to be kind of letting that be the reality. And I remember their faces like shining so brightly. So for whatever reason, I feel called to mention that game that I haven't
Well,
thought about.
I think it's a beautiful demonstration of what we opened with, the power of imagination,
Hmm.
opening the hardest play and that divine creativity flowing through, expressing itself through play, through the game, through the moment. And, our work is really divine intention using our own personal intention to do whatever it wants to do. We have the experience because we're people doing something, but it's all the divine playing through us. And that game is a perfect, demonstration of that, as is any type of creativity, really.
Hmm.
We take credit for it because we think we're so clever, but it's a beautiful demonstration in the power of imagination and how it makes us feel connected, to the divine. So I think that's beautiful. I love it. And I'm looking forward to coming to Omega to, play some more games this summer. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having you. And
Yeah,
Rick.
yeah, yeah. And Rick, absolutely, absolutely. So before we have a lot of healing, magic healing to share as well. Brett, you're going to be doing your healing, and then Galen and I will offer healing as well. But before we move into that, I just thought I'd allow, just even a few minutes if anyone had anything that they wanted to ask or share. I'll tell you what, I will stop the recording. So if anyone is feeling self-conscious, this won't be recorded. So let me pause the